American Newman Darby built the first sailboards during the 1960s. He rigged a sail to a mast on a board with a tail fin and rode the wind and waves. Today's windsurfers can pay several $1,000s for their high-tech gear. This includes a sail, a mast, and a sailboard. To make a sailboard, workers start with a long block of styrofoam. They attach a wood template, pushing nails through holes in the wood and into the block. Using an electrically heated tool called a hot wire, they slice the block along the curved line of the template. The result is what's known as the core. They use styrofoam because it's lightweight and buoyant. Next, a worker guides what's known as a shaper machine. It outlines a template, called a masterboard, on the left, while a spindle cuts grooves into the core on the right. The grooves are guidelines to carve the core into the shape of the masterboard later on. The shaper's 18-kilogram counterweight lets the spindle gently hover above the core as it cuts. Styrofoam dust flies everywhere, so the worker wears a protective mask to avoid inhaling it. A worker then saws along the grooves to reveal the initial shape of the sailboard. Another worker then sands down the core. Next, he applies 650 grams of epoxy resin onto carbon fabric to reinforce the material and make it sticky. Another worker applies resin on fiberglass fabric. These strong, lightweight materials are part of the board's fabric and foam sandwich construction. They'll harden inside molds of the board's top and bottom sections during curing later on. The workers carefully scrape away about 20% of the resin. Too much, and the board could crack during use. Here the worker spreads thicker resin onto a 3mm thick piece of rigid foam. He places it into the bottom mold and attaches a hand-sized plastic component called a fin box. It'll hold the sailboard's fin, which helps the user steer. They add Kevlar, an ultra-lightweight synthetic fabric, as the final outer layer on the core's bottom side. After applying resin to another piece of rigid foam, a worker cuts openings through which other components will later fit. This layer is placed into the top mold and covered with more carbon fabric. Next, a worker places the core into the bottom mold. He fits two plastic components, called foot strap inserts, into openings lined with fiberglass fabric to secure them. Another plastic component, called a mast track, fits through an opening lined with a stronger carbon fabric. The track will later anchor a mast measuring up to 6 meters high. Strips of carbon fabric also reinforce the areas where the windsurfer will stand. Workers join the mold sections and insert the whole thing into a plastic sack called a vacuum bag. They tape the end shut, but leave two smaller holes open. They attach two hoses to collars in these holes. An electric pump then takes about 3 minutes to suck all the air out of the bag. As the air is removed, pressure forces the mold sections even closer together. After curing in an oven at 38 degrees Celsius for 5 hours, workers separate the mold sections. Using a rotary grinder, a worker trims away excess hardened fabric and foam along the edge. The whole board got a coat of primer earlier, but now a worker sands the paint off along the edge. They place a strip of carbon fabric all the way around the edge and secure it with thin plastic wrap. After more curing, the wrapping is removed and the board is sealed for good. Next, the sailboard gets 2 coats of urethane paint. A worker locates the foot strap insert holes and cleans them out with a router bit. He uses a router to clean the inside of the mast track opening. An enormous vinyl sticker gives the board its personality. A worker smooths away any air bubbles. Then, after inscribing the sailboard's dimensions and serial number, he signs the board. Finally, workers glue on 2 rubber cushions called deck pads. For $1,900, you've got the foundation of a very cool gliding machine.